I have a stack of questions up here and adding to that pile. I did not put these in order. I promise you that if we do not get to your question in the next hour and 5 minutes, we have these questions, and I will take many more, and we will get to those questions in one way or another, okay? So please know that. That's important to us, all right? Bishop and Deputation, are you okay if I just start with our questions? Let's do it. Okay. Question, which of the 5 missions in quotes, of the church will be used, these are the marks of mission, I'm assuming. Which of the 5 marks of missions of the church will be used to direct our resources to A049, A050, so 49 same-sex blessings liturgy, A050 study of marriage, and D018 fall under. Okay, D018, the discrimination against marriage, same-sex marriage. So this person is asking, under which mark, tell me if I'm wrong, under which mark will our resources in response to A049, 50, and D018 fall?
It's going to be the first one, to proclaim the good news of the kingdom. And to teach, baptize, and nurture new believers. Those two. The budget allocated for that right now, I think, is it's folded into the budget for the Standing Committee on Liturgy and Music as it does its work in the next triennium. So I think that committee's entire budget is a couple of $100,000, and it's not just on this. It's also on. There are a number of other rights. There's our book called Holy Men and Holy Women. There are a number of things that they'll be working on. So the budget for that goes into a number of things. But I think they also have like all the other standing committees, have a travel budget as well. I think the total budget for the SCLM is $350,000. I think out of the over the triennium. So I'm guessing that's probably the mark of mission that it's under.
Scooty? 3, say more. The third mark? Yeah.
And also, I think maybe the third mark, respond to human need by loving service. And number 4 as well. All 5.
Okay, thank you for that question. I'm just going to note here, some of you have written more than one question on a sheet, and I think just in fairness, I'm going to check off the one that we've answered, I'm going to put a circle around the one we have not, and I'm going to move on to someone else's question. Okay, questions. This next question is on C095, which, as you recall, the first one on your page is structural reform to the church. This person asks, how will members of the independent task force be chosen? Again, to be clear, this is the task force that the national church will be choosing. I think it's 30 people or 29 people or something that will start to work on the study about reimagining the structure of the church. I don't know if we know that. Do we know the answer to that?
We know this is appointed jointly, but we do know. They'll be appointed by the presiding bishop and the president of the House of Deputies. So they will make those appointments.
Sally?
Yes.
I was in conversation with the newly elected president of the House of Deputies towards the close of General Convention. And asked that same question. And one of the things she said was what Belton just answered. Certainly the president of the House of Deputies and the presiding bishop, they're also going to rely on the Standing Commission on structure to help guide them with these decisions too. And evidently they've already begun having conversations. And they're going to try to pull in representatives from provinces, so that all of them will have a voice in this.
Okay. This is clearly referencing A049, I believe, blessing of same-sex unions or relationships. In essence, you are saying that my work on understanding the theological basis for the rights is wrong. I think that's a statement and a question. There are those of us who believe that all or at least sufficient rigor is done. How can you say that we are wrong? Okay, fair.
I better do that one.
Yeah.
When I left Indianapolis, I went for a 5-day escape from the church into the National Archives with my son doing railroad history research. On the plane to D.C., I sat down in my chair and didn't know who I was sitting next to, but suddenly I hear, Bishop Waldo? And it was somebody who is a member of what's called the Chicago Consultation, a guy named Jim Naughton or McNaughton. I think it's Naughton. Jim, I can't remember his last name. It's either McNaughton or Naughton, who has been actually very involved in helping to move what has become known as the Blessing Project forward. In the course of my discussion with him, we got into a real thoughtful and reflective discussion about the theological questions that I have around this. And Jim, one of the things I said was, well, so if we've been doing this for 40 years, working on this for nearly 40 years, why is it that there has not been more direct engagement with the received tradition in the theological work done in support of it? And in particular, my biggest issue on this is in the document that we receive at General Convention, which represents our church's official statement. Okay, to me, there's a lot of work that's been done around the edges. And people often say, well, the work has been done. And I want to say, but it's not in this document. And this is what the world is going to see as our rationale. They're not going to read all the footnotes and go to all the things that are all around. But even when I get into those, I can see that a lot of theological work has in fact been done. It just hasn't been done very often in direct engagement with the received tradition. A question I often ask is, if you believe that homosexuality is a sin, and there's nothing in here that describes how it might not be, then you're not going to open the document. My concern about that is a question of unity within the church. For me, it is a question of respect for the dignity of every human being to address the question that's actually being asked. When I had this conversation with Jim Naughton and brought this up, he very interestingly, I think correctly, said, well, you know, up until about 2 or 3 years ago, everything we've been trying to say about this from the side of those supporting same-gender blessings has been done in a context of all-out war. That there's so many on the right who have been so negative and oppressive and hateful in some of their responses. Not everybody, but there's been so much of that and we all know, any of us who are married know, that when you get into a tense conversation and the stakes are high and you're arguing, you're not going to be doing your best, most thoughtful and reflective work. That's when doors get slammed. And when I started asking the questions I was asking, he said, you know, you're right. We really haven't addressed those things, and we need to. But he was now saying that in the context of an environment that at convention was more respectful. Now, I will also say of convention that it is less diverse than it once was. And one of my points about this diocese that I so treasure, and I keep trying to say it over and over and over again, and this is frustrating for me. I say often, I support the full inclusion of gay and lesbian persons in the life and ministry of the church. And for me, that means eventually finding a place for these blessings to happen. Okay? That's part of what that means. But I also am concerned about this theological piece here. And the reason I'm concerned is because we have such a diversity of theological views, and that is so rare in the church. I truly beg to differ. That there are places, but if you were to ask me which way this diocese leans, I could not tell you. When I was in Minnesota, it was really obvious that it tipped. Okay? If you go to LA, it's very obvious that it tips. If you go to Newark, it's obvious that it tips. New York, Long Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, there's absolutely no question that it's different. Are we the only diocese that's balanced? No. But they're relatively few. I saw people leaving all the time in Minnesota. They weren't part of the discussion. And because I treasure that, and that to me is actually part of the vow that I take to uphold the unity of this church. But I got to tell you, the question, the point that Jim was making about the environment for asking questions was really accurate. There have been times when people who have tried to have this conversation from the perspective of trying to find a space for gay and lesbian persons who have been treated as pagans, as being merely interested in sex. And I got to tell you, the conversations I have with couples who are in committed relationships, that's not the primary subject. The primary subject has a lot more to do with exactly the kinds of things that people in a heterosexual marriage hold up as the ideal for that relationship. And those are questions we also have to listen to. So you elected a bishop who is a radical centrist. So if you're on the right, I'm going to push you. If you're on the left, I'm going to push you. But we are going to find a way forward, and we're not going to dilly-dally about it. Because, frankly, I think we're all tired of talking about and fighting about this. I think we are all ready to get on with the core of mission, of God's mission in the church, which is to serve the homeless, the hungry. It is to bear witness to God's love, not to God's laws. But Jesus did say, I have come to fulfill, not to abolish. So those laws are still here. We can't just say they don't exist. But we find that balance between law and grace that errs on the side of grace. One of the other things I didn't mention yet that is present in the resolutions on this, and the resolution on this is that the authority of the bishop to determine how it will be lived out is maintained in this, and I will do that. And yes, I've had frustrated people on both sides coming at me over the past week. A lot more of them in Minnesota who are really angry and not talking to me anymore. And that saddens me more than you can possibly imagine, because some of them are people who have been my closest friends for nearly 20 years. But the inclusion of everybody, left and right, is my vow. Well, it's not, the resolution itself says Advent 2012. So we couldn't do it tomorrow anyway. Right? This bishop isn't going to do that. I have promised I'm not going to rush this. And so to those of you who are hurt by that, I apologize. But you got to hear me. Many people say when they hear me talking about this, suddenly they'll come back and start arguing with me about theological points about same-gender relationships. And I want to say, We're talking apples and oranges. I'm talking unity. You're talking about a particular thing, and they are not exactly the same. I'm talking about a dialogue. I'm talking about creating space for everybody, and I intend to create the space for gay and lesbian persons too. Where it's not there, I mean, I don't know what else to say, but it is critically important to me that we find a space forward and get on with our mission.
Okay, we're going to come in and out of different issues, if that's okay with you. I'm going to look at these questions so that we all have a little bit of a breath here. This is a pretty simple one, I believe. When will a new presiding bishop be, it says replaced, I think you mean elected. Got it? Simple on one level and so very deep on another level. I understand. So we have a task force
There was a Title IV canon about bishops that passed, about dissolving the relationship with bishops, but this is not one of them.
It's not that.
You can talk to me, I guess.
So one of the things that happened while we were at convention is that the different provinces, I believe it was provincial, among the deputies who were there, they had special meetings to elect representatives from each province, stop me when I'm wrong, to be on the committee to help choose the next presiding bishop. And the House of Bishops had already done that work at the Synod meeting, I guess, or at your previous House of Bishops meeting. So our current presiding bishop, Catherine Jeffords Shorey, her term ends in 2015, is that right? And so this committee that was elected from all of the provinces will be starting its work to choose the next presiding bishop, okay? Because these are pretty quick, I am going to take, I'm sorry, Bishop, please.
I'd like to say something, because I know that the Wall Street Journal just raked her over the coals. And I just want to say that her leadership of the House of Bishops is uniformly admired by the bishops. She has this business about her being a dictator and secretive is just utter nonsense. When she leads us, she is absolutely open with us. She is graceful to everyone there, and she is the most businesslike. When the House of Bishops, and she's got the gavel, things move. Things move, and space is created. When there were plenty of points of personal privilege that were